Building a thriving team, even virtually, can feel impossible if you're unsure of your leadership style. Today's guest will show you how to tap into your unique leadership strength and create a more engaging and productive online work environment, as well as taking that to the next step and use virtual events to really get known. If you're ready for strategy talks, so are we. Join us.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Here's your host, Dorien Morin-van.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Strategy Talks. I'm excited to be back for another wonderful episode with an amazing guest. If you're here live, let us know in the comments that you're watching live and what platform you see us on. If you're watching this on the replay, make sure to put hashtag replay in the comments so myself and my guests can see if you have questions or comments. We'd love to engage with you. Last but not least, if you're listening to Strategy Talks as a podcast, we want to welcome you to that you're here, and we thank you for being one of those wonderful listeners that come back week after week. So without much further ado, I'm going to bring onto the stage my guest today, Michael Tucker. How are you today, Michael?
I am amazing. I feel good, and I'm excited for this conversation. I just have a feeling this is going to be amazing.
Yeah, no, me too. This is just actually a wonderful topic. You and I were talking in the green room about virtual events. And for those of you who've attended them, you know there's huge value in getting, all these speakers. You don't have to leave your home. You can sit in your backyard, on your front porch, in your home office, on your couch, right? And learn and absorb all this wonderful information. So we're going to talk about that with Michael today, because Michael is an expert in running these and really setting them up if you're a business owner. But before we do that, Michael, the first question I want to ask you is there's a clear difference, right, in managing a virtual event, an in-person event, a virtual team, an in-person team. Can you name some of the differences between the two before we get into scaling your business through virtual events? Kind of like, what are some of the main things that we have to be aware of when we do virtual versus in-person?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, as you are aware, the pandemic back in 2019, 2020 changed a lot of things, right? And so, a lot of individuals, a lot of business owners were used to doing business in person. They were used to doing events in person. And then, once that happened, a lot of things shifted. A lot of people went virtual. A lot of people started building virtual teams. And it's a whole different dynamic. And so, over the past 3 to 4 years, that's actually all I've done. Even it started a little bit before the pandemic. My whole team's always been virtual. We've always done virtual events. And so I say this, it's a whole lot more cost effective, right? So if you're here and you have an in-person team or you've been running in-person events, just know that virtual is a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper. But at the same time, it requires the same amount of responsibility though. Even though it may be cost effective, there is responsibility of you being a leader, right? You stepping up to the plate, doing what you're supposed to do and taking responsibility for your role. Just because people are based around the world, you don't see them every day in face to face, you still have to step up, be a leader and take your people to the promised land. So I will say I love virtual events. I love just the way we hire virtually because of the fact that it is cost effective and it's really truly allows you the freedom to do whatever you want as a business owner. But then as well, I always tell people, don't forget, you still have to be a leader.
Right. So what are some of those differences then? I mean, is it more work? Is it less work? Is it different work? Are there certain pitfalls that people fall into that, either from the worker side, right, from your team side, that they think, oh, I can do less? Or do you find that people are more motivated? Those are some of the things that we think, right? I know it's not true, but
I would definitely say it's probably I don't want to say more work, but you have to be more intentional whenever it comes to leading an online team. And I know the conversation we're having today is about virtual events, but we're kind of talking about virtual hiring as well. So they're two different things. But whenever it comes to virtual hiring, you really have to be intentional, and you can't let let me say it this way: you have to be more proactive in management. Okay, so whenever it's virtual, you got people sitting at home, you have people sitting maybe on the beach doing work. I don't know. So you have to be more proactive in your management, and you have to be really intentional about building a culture that fits you and your organization. Because what happens is, if you don't have a culture, then you don't have really a standard to set your people up to. And then, for example, I'll give you one. We had a employee one time, not saying any names or anything, but this individual, because we had company culture and company core values set up, virtually, she wasn't showing up on time. She was, I'll just say this: she wasn't telling the truth oftentimes. And our core values are: you strive for excellence, which excellence means showing up early, not on time, right? Different things like that. And because we had those set in stone, I could go to that individual and say, hey, you see why we're letting you go is you're not holding up to our company culture and our values. When you came on our team, you said you agreed to these, and you obviously are not. So the differences are, you really, really, really have to pay attention to how you craft the foundation of your business, because if you don't, then you're going to have people doing anything and everything they want, and no really accountability. That can be the same in person, but it really takes you have to put that implementation in place whenever it's virtual, because there's a whole different level of trust. You don't see what people are doing behind the camera. You don't see what people are doing behind the screen. So you have to have that company foundation set straight. So right now, if you're here listening, if you don't have core values set out for your company, why not? If you don't have all these things in place, start at the basics, start at the foundation, because I promise you it'll help, especially if you're going to hire virtually.
I love that. I was just going to recap it just like that. If you're watching, if you're a marketer, if you're a business owner, and you're thinking about scaling your team, scaling your agency, scaling your business, set up those company values, do that work on your own or with your small team. If you have a team, or with a business coach, do that work now and set it up. So when it makes it easier to hire the right people too, right, Michael?
Yeah, it makes it easier to hire the right people, but then also, again, the management side comes in. See, what most people do is they create core values, they create a mission statement, they create all these things, and they put it on a shelf somewhere, they put it on a wall, but never revisit it again. That's not what I want you to do. That's not what we want you to do. We don't want you just to create these things once and stick them in the back somewhere. We want you to have them head on in the front of everything you do. So actually, one of my colleagues and business partners, he does this so well. Every meeting, he starts out by reading their core values. Every meeting they start out by, and I say team meetings, they start out by reading, what the company goals are and mission statement, all that. And so everybody's reminded daily what they're supposed to be aiming for. For him, he wants people who are hungry. And so he shares that every time they have team meetings. He wants people that are helpful, and he has all these laid out. And so people know if they're hitting that mark or not. And so that would be my advice, is that not just build those, but actually revisit them daily or weekly with your team and with yourself. And core values and things may change over time, but you should start by building them and then keep them in the forefront.
I love that. Keep it a living document. That's awesome. So let's shift to virtual events. What can you tell us about virtual? What should we know? Let's start from the beginning.
Well, I want to actually do that. I want to go back to the beginning of whenever I got into all this. And you're like, Michael, how in the world does virtual hiring and virtual events coincide with each other? And it goes back to actually when I was in college. Okay. So I was in college, just gotten married to my high school sweetheart. And like most college individuals, I was dead broke. Okay. Broke as a joke, had nothing to my name. I graduated. I was living paycheck to paycheck as a restaurant server. And I said, I knew there's more for life. And you're probably listening to this right now. Your audience is listening to this, and you were like, that's me. That's why I started a business. I knew there was more for life, and that was me. I said, man, I got to do something bigger and better, make an impact. So I went on this journey to find the thing. We all know what the thing is, right? Like you're looking for the thing. And so I tried everything and anything to make a dollar. I tried stock trading. I tried eBay, e-commerce, anything you can imagine. I promise you, I tried it. And then I found myself just banging myself in the head saying, why is none of this stuff working? And one day, one of my friends came to me and he said, hey, Michael, you should try out real estate. You're pretty good at sales. You're good at talking. He's like, you should get into real estate. Now, I know this conversation is not about real estate, but it was actually the gateway to allow me to get into the world of marketing and business. And here's how. I said, David was his name. I said, David, you realize I just got out of college. I have no money to get in real estate. He was like, yeah, but I'm going to show you how to do it without it. And I said, okay, well, let's do it. And he said, but my coaching is XYZ amount. Okay. I was like, I just told you, I don't have money. I said, so let's figure out a win-win scenario. I said, you want to coach me, obviously, for a fee. I don't have the fee. So let's figure this out. And so we sat down and we came up with this game plan. I was going to barter my labor for his coaching. So I stepped into his coaching business, into his real estate business, and I did not know what I was doing, but I was helping him build out websites, funnels, graphics. They were horrible. When I tell you horrible, I mean, I look back on them now and I cringe, but I just did it and he didn't have anybody. So I stepped in, filled the gap. And that was the first official step of me jumping into business and the marketing world. Now, little side note here, there's a gem in there that I want you all to get. The gem is just because you don't have a way to get into something or to accomplish something now doesn't mean you can't come up with a creative way to find a solution. For me, that was bartering. That's one of my favorite things to do. If you don't have finances, how can you barter your services? How can you barter your labor, your time, your energy for something in exchange? And I still do this all the time. So for me, it was that bartering of my energy and my time and my little skills that I had for that coaching that changed my life. So that was the very beginning. And from there, we ended up, I didn't know what I was doing, but we started testing and tweaking things in his business, started building out funnels, started, trying different things. And eventually we came across this thing called a webinar, which we've all heard of, right? We all heard of webinars. And webinars were the big thing because this was back in like 2000, I don't even know, 14, 2015, somewhere in there. And everybody was saying, you need to do a webinar. And so we tried it and it flopped. Okay. We, you guys ever launched a product before? Maybe you have as well. You ever like build something, you try to sell it and you're like, oh, let's go buy it. And then nobody buys it.
Yeah.
That was me. And so we were in we just took weeks to build out this webinar, which if you don't know what a webinar is and you're listening to this, it's just pretty much a virtual event where you pull people into a room for 60 to 90 minutes and you sell a service or product at the end. You teach them for 60 to 90 minutes and at the end you sell. And we built that. We built out all the funnels, the sequences. And when we, got a small group of people in a room and presented the offer, nobody bought. And it was really discouraging.
It's a lot of work. If you're listening to this, building out a webinar and building out a funnel like that, that's a lot of work, Michael. You are totally right. There's, pre-emails and set up registration and then the selling part. And so that's got to be frustrating when then nobody sells 100%.
Yeah. And
nobody buys. Yeah,
exactly. And I apologize. I'm talking a little longer on this story, but I want them to get like how the power of this and what it can do for them.
Sure.
And so we launched that webinar funnel. It flopped. And you might be like, Michael, you're talking about virtual events, but you're telling me that flop. Why are you talking about this? We had a mentor, which at the time was a friend. He reached out and said, hey, I see what you guys are doing online, but I think there's a better way. And we said, well, we don't know much, so you teach us and show us. So he sat us down for free in Zoom for an hour, and he laid it out exactly what we should do, what we should change, what we should fix. Long story short, we ran back and ran our next virtual event, made $30,000. $30,000. And for me at the time, that's what I made in a year as a restaurant server, probably a little bit more. So my mind was blown. I was like, we just made $30,000 in 1 week, and it took me 12 months to make that. My mindset shifted forever. And long story short, we ended up running that same play, that same virtual event multiple times over the course of 10 months. And we made $750,000 in 10 months. And so it was that first event where we made $30,000 that changed my life completely, because I said, virtual events are the thing that I'm going to get good at. And I truly believe if you're listening to this right now, if you have a business and you want to take your message online, or you want to take your services and your products online, I truly believe virtual events can be the way to scale your income because I've experienced it. We've helped 100 plus entrepreneurs do it. We've generated over $40 million now over the past 3 to 4 years through this. And it blew my mind. So now I'm a full blown believer. But that's how I got into virtual events. It wasn't because I, decided I'm going to go to school to learn all this digital marketing. It was through action. And so virtual events, I just love it. I'm on a tangent here, but I love it. It just makes me so excited.
I love it. I love it. And I love the story. And I'm going to go back to your beginning because for those of you listening, some of you might know my story, but very similar to Michael, I started out just like him, bartering. I had taken an online social media manager course. Literally put my thing on LinkedIn that said I'm a social media manager, and a local charity reached out and said, we don't have any social media. Do you want to be our social media director? But we can't pay you. And I'm like, sure, because now I have a title on LinkedIn that says social media director for XYZ charity in the local area. I'll do your social media. I ended up having a partnership with them for 3 years. And in those 3 years, I was able to build my business and my portfolio of clients. So
that's amazing.
If you're taking anything away from this today, is say yes to opportunities and learn as you go, because both Michael and I can, show you and tell you this is a great way to get started. Now, virtual events. So I want to know, Michael, if you could share with us a little bit, what was the difference between your flopped launch of the webinar and the successful first virtual event that made you $30,000? Because, I want actionable things. What are some things that you can share with us that made it different?
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, there wasn't a lot of big tweaks. A lot of them were small. Number one is running events, remembering it's not about you, but it's about the person on the other end of the phone. And so many people, when they run events or they're promoting their products, I've accomplished this, I've done that. What problem and what solution are you trying to solve? That's the question you need to ask. So for the individual on the other end of the computer or the other end of the screen, what solutions and problems are you trying to solve for them? And how can you relay the solution in a manner, in a virtual event, we'll say it that way, right? And so for us at the very beginning, I think one thing we did wrong was too much about me, and we never really turned the focus about them. And so making that one shift to, hey, this is how you are struggling with XYZ, and this is how we can help you, was tremendous. And I know that some people may overlook that, maybe seem simple, but look about it. Most people look at it this way. Most people go into webinars. You ever been to a virtual event or webinar and the person talks about themselves for like 30 minutes? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And guess what? You're going to have people leave at the 10, 15-minute mark because they're like, who in the world is this? I don't care why they got a pig at home, a dog at home. Like, they don't care. So remember.
Well, they don't care, but hooking them in with a short story, a 2-minute,
Well, that's
hey,
what I was
I'm
going to
here and
say.
you're there.
This
There's
is what I was going
something
to
there.
say. If you're running virtual events right now, it could be as simple as introducing yourself for 5 or 10 minutes instead of 30 minutes. You still need to build credibility. You still need to establish a connection, right? What we're doing right now, we still need to establish a connection. But just remember, it's less about you and more about them. And so I'm not saying leave out stories. I'm not saying introduce yourself, because that's important. And they need to know who you are and how you can help them and the experience you have. But let's change the content a little bit. Change the content. So that was number one. And does that make sense? I just want to make
It
sure.
makes a lot of sense. And I attend a lot of conferences in person as well as online. And I can tell how experienced somebody is about speaking. If they're not experienced, they put the first slide is about them. And if they're experienced speakers, the last slide's about them, right? Because if you're new to speaking, you think that's important to put yourself out there and tell people why they should listen to you. But experienced speakers know that you wouldn't be on stage if you weren't important enough to listen to. And so you need to go into and make it about them right away and tell a story that relates to them. So yes, absolutely. It totally makes sense what you're saying.
Love it. So that was probably one thing that we changed. The second thing that we changed that, I'll say this, was changing the amount of time we spent with people. Now there's different kind of virtual events. But just write this down if you're taking notes. You may be driving, listen to this. You may be cooking, I don't know. But if you're anywhere near pen and paper, I want you to write this down. The more immersion, the higher the conversion. Okay? So let me explain that. The more time people spend with you, the more time people spend with your team, the more time people listen to you, watch you, the higher the chances of them actually converting to a customer or client. And so for us, it was simple. Our coach and our mentor at the time, which was a friend, sat down and said, "Hey, you're not teaching enough. You're teaching too short." And so actually, what we ended up doing was we went to a longer event model. Now, I'm not saying you have to go do a super long event, but that's actually, we focus on the 5-day challenge model now. I don't know if you're familiar with the 5-day challenge model at all, but it's pretty much where
Absolutely.
you do a 5-day virtual event. You teach
Mhm.
for an hour, hour and a half for 5 days straight. And so we actually started implementing some of those. And that's when we started seeing some skyrocket. And we still use webinars to this day, those 60 to 90-minute classes. But once we started, because we were selling a high ticket product, we were selling $5,000-$6,000 product. And so once we started spending more time with people and running through a longer, like 5-day challenge model, we really started, people they trusted us more. Our rapport got, built faster, and people were more amped up to take the opportunity because they trusted us more ultimately in the end. So just ask yourself, how much time am I spending with people? How much are they consuming before or after the events and during the events? So that was one other little thing there to make note of.
That's a great point. I think that's one that a lot of us get wrong. We're not available to answer the questions, or we just want to teach a little bit because we're afraid to give too much away. But what if you were to teach 60 to 90 minutes, 5 days in a row? That's very powerful. Michael, I really like that. I think it's a good reminder for all of us to give more and spend more time with our potential clients. I think
Yeah, and I
this is
mean, it's not
great.
always. I'll say this because I want to make a mental note there for people that maybe have this question is, well, I'm just going to go out there and give, which you should give. And there's two thoughts here I'll give. Number one, it's not always about giving them more content, but being strategic about what you're giving them. So for us in our virtual events, I tell people all the time, they're not attending a virtual event. You're like, Michael, we've been talking about virtual events. What do you mean? No. They're attending a transformational experience when they come and they work with me or they attend my virtual events. It's a transformational experience where I'm going to help them get closer to their goals. I'm going to help them shift their mindset. I'm going to help them get rid of those self-limiting beliefs. And so the goal for me is when people come in, I'm going to add value to them, but I'm there to change their life. I'm there to change how they think, help them overcome any hurdles and obstacles they've been facing. And so think about it from this perspective. How can I craft content that's going to impact them more than just educate them? Okay. So you want to educate, but I'm more about the impact. And when you do that, people will look at you totally different. And so that's just sitting down, being really methodical about what their pain points are, what they're struggling with right now. But I will say this last thing, and then I'll hand it back over to you, is a lot of people will say, well, I'm just afraid that I'm just going to give all my stuff up anyway. Like, how do I make sure that I don't give out everything I know? And I'll say this, if you can share everything you know in 90 minutes or even up to 3 to 5 hours, you probably need to get better at your craft. And that's not me like being mean. I'm just saying, like, you need to keep putting in the reps because, and I'll say this, you probably know more than you're giving yourself credit to. If you're like, I'll give everything out in 90 minutes, even if it's 3 to 5 hours, you know more than you think. And so have confidence in yourself. You can do this. You're amazing. And I believe in you.
That's awesome. So, if somebody wants to get started with, say, a 5-day challenge, where, or maybe something smaller, 3-day challenge, a 5-day challenge seems too much of a lift for you. Do we start with a customer pain point? Do we start with the end product? What do we want to sell? What goals? How does somebody get started? They're listening to this, they're watching this. Michael, you make it seem easy. We're going to make it about their pain points. We're going to, make sure we
Right.
spend time with them. Where do we start? Do we start with pen and paper, mind mapping something out? Do we start with find a team to do this with? Is this something that somebody can do alone? I guess that's my big
Yeah.
core
I
question.
feel like there's like 2 or 3 questions in there. So let me break them out each. Number
Okay.
one, number one, you can make these as simple or as complex as you want. I was actually listening to a podcast or YouTube video yesterday of a very well-known marketer, and he said this to me and it resonated. He said, the reason why your business is not scaling is probably because it's too complex. Complex cannot scale. And so he shared that, and I was like, oh, wow. With virtual events, and he was actually talking about virtual events at the time, he was like, simple is better. So you can make virtual events as complex. You could have all the email sequences, all the automations, or you can make them super simple. So right now, I would take an assessment and say, hey, where am I at? Do I have a team? Do I not? Do I have capacity to do a longer event? Do I not? Do I have the confidence to do a longer event? Do I not? So just take an assessment where you're at. And I would say, if you're brand new, never done a virtual event before, start out with something like a webinar where it's 60 to 90 minutes. Start out basic. The first one may be rough, but the second, third one are going to get better and better and better. So start out doing something like that. But if you're like, hey, I think I can maybe do something longer, awesome. Figure out, say, how can I implement this? How can I not overcomplicate it? Because I see so many people start running these events and start building them, and they never actually complete them or fulfill them because they get overwhelmed. But let's just start basic. So I would say that just take evaluation where you're at. But number two, if you feel like you want to take the expedited path, there are people out there that will help you run your virtual events. Our company is one of them. I'm not promoting myself, but there's many other companies out there as well, and individuals that can step in and help you build the funnels and the automations and your set up your Zoom room and all that stuff. So you just have to figure out what you want. And but it all does start in no matter what event we run, we do sit down and say, okay, what is the end goal? What do we want people to do? And we start with this is my way. I say, okay, what product am I going to sell through this? And then, okay, I want to sell XYZ mastermind or this coaching program. Okay, cool. How can we craft the event in a way to move people towards that? And so normally once I know the product I'm going to sell, then I say, okay, what's the end goal that this product helps solve? And so what I normally do is I get on a piece of paper. So if you have a piece of paper with you, I don't have a pen next to me, but I have paper. But I would just, well, actually, I got a marker here. So if you're listening to audio, you're like, what in the world is this guy doing? He's crazy. So if you're listening to audio, what I normally do is just draw a straight line on a piece of paper. Pretty simple. You can't see the line because my light's too bright. But and at one end, you're going to put their dreams, right? Their goals. And then the other end, the beginning, you're going to put where they're at, right? So one end, on this side, you're going to put their dreams and their goals, everything they want to achieve. Over here, you're going to put where they're at, what they're struggling with, what's hurting them. So for example, if you're in the fitness niche, they may be struggling with not having accountability. They may be struggling getting the courage to go in the gym because they're afraid. It's just that they don't know what foods to eat because they're confused about what diet they need to go on. And then the virtual event is what's this middle part here. The virtual event's the middle part, because ultimately what's going to get them to their dreams, their goals, is going to be your mentorship, your coaching program, your product, your service.
Right.
The event is what bridges the gap. The event is going to be what helps get them closer. So whenever it comes to content, I'll say, okay, what's the bridge here between the two? What are some of the steps they need to take to get there?
Right.
What are some of the steps? So if they're struggling with going to the gym or finding the right diet, okay, I'll say, okay, one thing they need to do is they need to download this app. That's step one. So in my virtual event, I'm going to reveal this magical app that helps, do X, Y, Z. Right?
Yeah. No, I get it. That's awesome.
And so you lay all that out. And so I would say start with this, and you'll get on a good way, but don't overcomplicate it, guys. You're going to make mistakes either way.
Yeah.
Think it out, come up with ideas, but execution is the master of all.
I love it. We are at just about at 30 minutes, Michael. This has been fantastic. I knew you were going to be a great speaker. Where can people connect with you if they are ready to move forward or want to learn more from you before they move forward? What is the best platform to connect with you on? And I think you said you had a link to share with people if they want to check you out online. This is the great time to share that with everybody.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to sell you right now if you're listening to this, but if you want to talk and you want to see if virtual events are right for you, see how you can implement them in your business, I'd love to meet you. I'm very relational, very connection-based guy. So if you go to thefunnelpros, thefunnelpros.com, thefunnelpros.com. You can go and book a 15-minute call with me. We'll sit down virtually just like this, have a conversation, see what's up, and just chat. And if we can help you, awesome. If not, then we'll go ahead and send you some resources that may be able to help you in your journey. But then also on social media, if you're like, I'm not interested in booking a call, just let's connect on social media. Official Michael Tucker on most platforms, specifically Instagram. I love Instagram. Go over to official Michael Tucker, and I would love to connect with you there.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for bringing this wonderful information to our guests. If you're watching this, there's plenty of virtual events around. One of the tips that I will give you as we leave is Michael and I finishing this up. If you really don't know what to do, go attend some virtual events, and go figure out what you love and what you get out of it and how you learn, because that's a great way to get some ideas. I'm not saying steal other people's ideas, but go attend some virtual events. There's plenty of them out there, and learn as you go as well. So Michael, thank you so much for being with me today. And thank you so much for all of you who watch and listen to this podcast. I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Bye, everybody.
All right. See you all. Bye-bye.